If you're clicking on a video about a game that's nearly 10 years old now, I don't have to harp on just how fun it is. You probably already believe that yourself. Just Cause 3 is a bit of a comfort game for me, and it's often on my mind one way or another. This is the game that started my channel, after all, in the sense that the first video I ever made was an original iceberg on the subject where I came up with a bunch of fun theories about the game. It's always something I want to come back to, and just recently, I found my opportunity. I've become addicted to those videos that show off odd places in video games, even watching ones for games I haven't played yet, like the new Mario Kart, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I don't know, I think they're fun. Perspective is such an interesting thing in video game design. With each different type of game, be it a hyper-realistic one, a racing one, or maybe a classic fantasy one, all having perspectives skewed in one way or another. When you're flying past an object, for example, things have to be emphasized if they are to be noticed, so things are much bigger than they really should be. When you're funneled down one specific slim corridor, everything is perfectly aligned and scaled, but in a game where free roaming is prioritized, that realism has to be sacrificed, or else the map would just be too detailed to run, or even be created in the first place. That's why these types of videos are so fun, because they all show a different angle of game design, and they often make you stop and think about a game you may have played 100 times, and just look at it a little bit differently. And that is what I hope we're gonna do today. Just Cause 3 has a particularly interesting map for a variety of reasons. First off, it's huge, with some videos and sources I've seen recently ranking it as high as the 12th largest open world map ever. When you remove ones that rely on procedural generation, like Minecraft, No Man's Sky, or Elder Scrolls 3, it gets even higher on that list. Artistically, it strikes an interesting balance between realism and a certain exaggerated style that emphasizes the sandbox elements of the game. It might not have the most realistic cars or places or people ever, but it still really does well for a game that's generally focused on fun and action as opposed to immersion. Another often cited reason for the map being so fun is its abundance of Easter eggs. It's been thrown out there that the people who worked on the game were generally allowed to put whatever they wanted in it, and it really shows. I actually think Just Cause 3 might take the cake for the most individual Easter eggs in a single game, though that's of course subject to debate. I won't be talking about these today because even if they're interesting, they are intentional, and not really the odd or accidentally interesting spots that we're looking for. Like many games, Just Cause 3 is designed to look nice while moving fast, or from far away. The land masses and cities look believable, but of course, realism is lost when you get 5 feet away. Though generally these places feel lived in. In a game where so much time is spent blasting through the sky, or using the movement mechanics so central to the game, this is an enjoyable map to experience, even if just driving through. It's clear that the gameplay is supposed to be fast. I mean, for example, it's literally difficult to walk in the game. The zone that you can push your stick to have Rico walk instead of run is so tiny that it almost feels like you're strong-armed into not taking this map in slowly. Oddly enough, this limitation, or this funneling into a specific interpretation of the game, is what makes it all the more fun and rewarding to occasionally take it slow and really examine what Just Cause 3 has to offer. I'm going to look for a few places in the game that stood out to me as odd, for whatever reason. Though these places will elicit entirely different emotions or thoughts, I'm looking for stuff off the beaten path that the game generally doesn't really encourage you to look at or find. Of course, there might be some incentive to be there, but no major objectives, the type of things you might miss or overlook on a casual playthrough. A lot of these places are really cool because they often leave clues for storytelling, or they otherwise fit into the lore of the game, without it really being necessary or expected. I'll be excluding intentional Easter eggs and dev zones or out-of-bounds secrets or spaces from other builds of the game, though if you want more of those, I encourage you to check out Luke JC's channel. This guy has astounded me with the stuff he's been able to find after the game's been out for so long. Anyways, sorry for the rambling, and thanks for listening. If you like my videos from game theorizing to icebergs to online horror, make sure to subscribe. And in particular, show some love to this video, because if this gets enough views, I will drop at least 2 more videos on Just Cause 3 in anticipation of the game's 10-year anniversary. For now, let's get started with our first spot. Starting off with a pleasant location, I just wanted to point out this specific field of sunflowers just behind Porto Cavo, or Hollow Port for any Interlingua fans out there. If you head to that base, you can find this path behind the airstrip. Something I've come to appreciate this game is how there are plenty of places which, though not marked as roads in the map, really look like paths. This spot, for example, looks a little bit like a man-made but unmaintained road, with attractive sightlines beckoning you to go check it out. Following this way, you will come across a set of ruins, which we will keep seeing on this video today. But just to the left, you'll find this beautiful little field of sunflowers. Now, to be fair, there is a rebel shrine here, which sort of invalidates the idea that this is something you shouldn't find. But still, many people might overlook this spot if you don't care about collectibles, or since these symbols pop up on the map anyway, it's something you just grab and then leave. Of course, it might also be an intentional element of the design, with maybe these flowers planted in memory of someone. There are plenty of flowers in Just Cause 3, even giant fields of them, but this one is my favorite for whatever reason. It's just a sweet little area. If you sit around here, you can see butterflies and even hear crickets chirping at night, or find the game's usual fauna walking around. Something I found out while landing a plane here is that if you run over the flowers, you'll squish them for a little bit. But before you feel bad, they just pop right back up after a little while, though there's no animation for it. I think the views here are super pretty. I remember playing this game back in 2015 or whatever and taking screenshots all the time because the jagged cliffs and water or mountains or whatever just always looked really good. If yellow's not your color though, just below this spot you can find a smaller field of red flowers, which are pretty nice as well. It's definitely one of the larger flower fields in the game, and something you could totally miss if you didn't come behind this little mountain and check out this little nook. The next spot is, well, sort of this whole island, which can be found at these coordinates, lying just west of Guardia Capite 2. This island is interesting for a few reasons, and though all of it's cool, I'm more interested on what's on the bottom. The top of the island contains a plane racing challenge and a vintage part, so there is reason to go there. That side of the island has a dirt landing strip, which doesn't show up on the map, interestingly enough. The bottom is a bit more interesting. It looks like a long-abandoned civilian airport, but it has some peculiarities. The oddest thing you can find here, in my opinion, are these houses on the side. I know they're houses and not different buildings because they're built in the same way that the burnt-out houses and shops are in Insula Striante, the region where the burning of the North occurred. We'll talk about that later, but for now just know that these models are the same, and are designed to be houses or shops or whatnot. Something residential. They're clearly very old and decayed, but full of garbage that's at least recent enough to attract flies, which is odd. Maybe there's some homeless people camping out in here, but then again, they'd have to cross water to get here. Then there's the airport itself. It's got power, which is odd for something that looks so abandoned. Finally, there's the air traffic control tower, which is maybe the most perplexing. There's a ring of garbage that loads in here, which I'm nearly positive is unintentional, since it defies the laws of gravity. The interior of the ATC has been entirely stripped of computers and instruments, which is really odd given a ton of locations in the game use this same set of displays, especially in ATC towers. Here's where, in my opinion, we can do our first bit of storytelling. My idea for this spot is that the rebels took it over for their use, mainly in smuggling, as it's a much shorter airstrip than the military ones, and you can find the Cessna-type planes spawning in here. They wouldn't really need the ATC since, they're fighting a war, but they did manage to get the power running again for the landing strip. This is backed up by the fact that you can find a lone rebel hanging out here, which sort of gives it away. So that I can accept. Why, though, would they have built a second, shorter, and unlit strip on the other side of the mountain? Surely they wouldn't need more than one. Maybe it was a backup just in case this spot got bombed or something? That would explain why that one's unlit. The houses are a bit of a mystery to me too. How do they have power? I guess they're hooked up to the same grid as the landing strip. Maybe some retiree who liked to fly built this place. You can find a little chair in here, so I honestly think maybe the rebels who are assigned to guard this spot get bored and go in there to have a smoke, or something. Maybe eating the snacks that get dumped on the floor. This spot is peculiar, but I do think it tells a bit of a story. Another place with a little bit of a story is this spot right here. There's a warehouse in the Montana province that you'll definitely recognize if you've ever done a completionist run of the game. That's because right here you can find the Verde Leon 3, the fastest and, in my opinion, best looking car in the game. This is their only spawn location, and it always has a fun minigame if you come here. Because this location is so far up north, it's super far from garages, so if you want to log the car to drop it later, you either have to drive it an extremely long way or attach it to a helicopter and fly it. Both requiring patience and can potentially blow up the car. If that's not what you want to do, you could also take the shorter land route, and if you haven't done the mission that destroys the Bavarian missile base, you'll have the added challenge of making it through the spot without getting nuked, which is very difficult, but kinda fun to try. Anyway, there's a few reasons this place is so odd. There are identical control rooms in the rafters of the warehouse, which is strange. There's literally nothing to control here. No equipment, no nothing. So why do we see computer screens, control panels, even radar in here? Maybe this place used to be an assembly line or something, which is why there are these paths to walk above, and it's just been stripped and turned into a storage facility? I have an interesting theory as to why the cars are here though. I propose that this little spot is a bit of a looting operation. You see, if you play through the game without having liberated these areas, a small squad of troops will loiter around here. I think these guys are implicated somehow, probably working under Di Ravello's nose, smuggling luxury items. In this case, the race cars. This is something that happens all the time in war, either as a direct order from the top, or something that a couple soldiers or officers try and pull off in secret. It might be something Di Ravello tolerates, letting it happen in order to increase morale. So yeah, maybe these guys are part of a little group selling or exporting or otherwise keeping loot from the Burning of the North. Speaking of the Burning of the North, what was that? Well, basically it's the lore reason behind why Insula Striante is so militarized. Based on some information we have from town descriptions, we know this happened about 10 years before the beginning of the game. Di Ravello invaded, destroying all the civilian settlements above the southern areas of Insula Striante, then created a militarized wall to keep people separated. This was done with a few purposes in mind. First, to create a military buildup out of the eyes of the capital, and to start extracting Bavarium. You can still see the scars of this event all over the region, from rusted tanks left behind to burnout houses. Like pretty much all the architecture in the game, the major building blocks of these buildings are reused, so you can get the same idea in various spots, but that doesn't mean these all aren't worth checking out. After you beat the game or liberate this region, civilian traffic will return to the north. The rebels will capture the wall and people start going through it. If you go to this spot here, you can walk through one of these communities and see it when people are visiting. There's actually some light up signs that somehow have their power again. I like these ones here. Looks like this was a restaurant or maybe a liquor store, and then this spot was selling tobacco and SIM cards. Pretty European, if you ask me. You can also see some political messages around the buildings, though they're usually pretty obscured. There's also trees growing from inside, which is, once again, odd, but I guess if it's been 10 years, it could happen. Probably the coolest thing about these spots is when you find people here. Depending on which one you visit, you might run into someone like this, rummaging through garbage. This looked really weird to me at first, but then, if you consider that basically this is the first time civilians have been allowed this far north in 10 years, it actually gets a bit sad. To me, it reads like these NPCs are returning to their homes after 10 long years of war, finally released from exile. This person looks like they're digging through what used to be their apartment, or maybe their small business, rummaging for photos of loved ones or maybe a kid's long-lost stuffed animal. Remember, these people will only appear once you've liberated the area in-game. I think it's amazing, this level of environmental storytelling from such an action-packed game. These details really didn't need to be there, and they wouldn't be noticed unless you went looking around for them like I did. Let's see if we can find these signs anywhere else. I kinda just want to walk through a town and look at some details. Of course, plenty of them are similar, but for whatever reason, I thought Alba was a good example. It's not too big or too small, but there's lots of stuff to notice. We can actually find that same drink, soda salate, here. Oddly enough, in Interlingua, this translates to salty soda, which sounds disgusting. I like to think of it as Medici's national drink. You can find the signs everywhere, but the buildings usually look like restaurants. There's a lot of cool details of Medician life here. The signs and stuff get repetitive quickly, but I understand why. The developers, though obviously making the game set in English or whatever language you chose to play it in, supplemented it with Interlingua, which is usually used for naming the cars, weapons, places, and such, often inserted into the environment somehow. Interlingua is a constructed language, meaning it developed artificially. It was created by the American International Auxiliary Language Association, and only a few hundred people actually speak it. The words for it were sourced from Romance languages and English, and if you speak any French, Italian, Spanish, or Portuguese in particular, you can pretty much understand all of it. Oddly enough, within the game, it's referenced as also being a created language. The Black Hand soldiers will mention it being made in the 1960s, merging existing languages. Medician is really interesting in that regard. Though Di Ravello took power long after the 1960s, I could see him pushing for use of the language. Or maybe it's the opposite, with the rebels reclaiming the language as part of their own symbolism. Language and nationalism are highly intertwined. Efforts to use a separate language can be used to rally people against a common enemy, or colonialism, or something like that. You'll see that in Ireland, for example, where even though few people actually speak it, every sign in English has to be supplemented with Irish. Once again, I think the developers have, accidentally or not, added another layer of story with the language. Now, the real reason the developers use this is to distance Medici from any real European country. We know that Medici lies somewhere in the Mediterranean, but if people spoke Spanish or Italian or Portuguese or whatever, it would lead people to draw connections to real dictators, which the game devs obviously did not want. I actually think Medici most resembles the country of Malta, with Italy coming in at a close second. For me, what gives it away most, besides it being a tiny island country, are these fortifications. In Medici, living alongside old military forts is just a way of life, which you pretty much see happening exactly the same way in Malta. Anyway, this is a big tangent from the place itself, but I just wanted to talk about a typical Medician settlement, and maybe talk a little bit about that connection. The volcano is a very weird spot in Just Cause 3. It's the set piece for the climax of the game, spoiler alert for that, I guess, where you finally defeat Di Ravello, and either by your hand or his own, he meets his end. After the game finishes, you'll load into the same beach where Rico has a drink during the loading screen, lying on the eastern coast of the island. There is some cool stuff to find here, and at least one definite reason to visit, which is the Little General, Di Ravello's personal pistol, which you can find at the site of his death. It's a really powerful weapon, especially against vehicles, and if I lose it for whatever reason, I will go make the trip back here to get it. There's also a ton of these Greco-Roman looking ruins, the same ones that you could find in the normal map, but in a much greater abundance. Many agree that this is some sort of Pompeii reference, as it's apparent that the volcano exploded at some point and covered this place in ash. There are a lot of Easter eggs here, like the Skull Island face and this guy having a nice little charcuterie board. There are 2 traces of those forts I mentioned, the ones I said looked like the ones in Malta. These really don't belong here. Unless, of course, there was more of a fort that got destroyed, these are just odd details to have. They seem to serve no purpose. I mean, it's definitely worth securing this place to protect the mainland so no one could invade the volcano first and then stage a larger invasion, and it would be pretty easy to hold this giant mountain. But wouldn't there be more forts left? I guess that's not the tangent we're here for, though. The reason I think this spot, or more accurately, a few separate locations on the island, fits the definition of the odd places we're looking for in this video, is that it's just all so, well, unnecessary. The island is huge, bigger than any of the DLC areas and probably Insula Dracone as well. And for as big as it is, there's nothing here. No settlements or outposts or anything that would bring you here beyond post-game completion. That doesn't mean it's not worth exploring. There are a ton of spots here that I really love. It honestly looks beautiful, and I think the volcano may hold some of the prettiest landscapes in Just Cause 3. This forest right here, for example, is massive, and you can kind of pretend like you're just going on a hike and walk through it for a while. Many of the peaks sort of look like they have paths coming out of them, like this one here that leads to the fort ruins. I could totally imagine this being a legitimate hike. And again, it's just so stunning for an area you're really not encouraged to see. I have a theory as to why this place exists. I think the game devs just wanted a volcano, either for the game's ending or just to have, and then they realized into the creation of the map that it wouldn't fit anywhere on the mainland, but by that point it was already part of the narrative, so they had to put it somewhere else. But naturally, if you make an island volcano with too little land, you'll end up with something like Woohoo Island, where the dimensions of the volcano just make zero sense. So they compensated by making the place huge. Obviously, walking around in this game isn't going to be fun for any more than a few minutes, but I do think it's a blast to ride the four-wheeler through these little imaginary trails. It's definitely worth checking out. There's a beautiful little island in the north of Insula Striate, just a ways from Vulture, which has something that's confused me for quite a while. If you go up into the main clearing here, you'll find a dirt bike and two Weimaraner W3s, the game's version of a Land Rover or something. Not to look too far into this or anything, but how did these get here? It's an island, and last time I checked you can't ride a dirt bike through the sea. There's no developed port, so I can't imagine anyone ferrying these over here. And even if they did, what is there to explore? It's a tiny place. Maybe you could play with the dirt bikes, but the 4x4s? There's nowhere to go. Who put these here, and why? The cars work, which I know is significant because lots of cars are burnt out or otherwise broken, especially up north. Assuming these weren't put here recently then, and the car batteries haven't died, did these belong to soldiers? It just seems like an expensive endeavor to get these out here. Anyway, this place is a nice little spot, but I just thought that part was really odd. Another spot in the game that's weird in its entirety is the main base from the Stingray area, which is part of the Sea DLC. Right off the bat, just being able to enter this spot is what makes it so unique. Like many other open world games, there's a vibrant map, but you can't really enter the buildings, unless it's in story mode, and even then, only occasionally. The DLC's all added interior locations, but with the air and land maps, most of them are off limits once you've played through the story. Here though, it's different, and I think that's because this spot has tape recordings, which you need to collect for an unlockable, so they left it open to the player. But this whole place is really creepy. There's a whole different soundscape in here, one of rickety metal and flying sparks. The people here, presumably killed by this electricity, lie rotting, and don't resemble any other corpses in the game. Obviously, these aren't scary, but compared to the other cartoonish ragdolls in Just Cause 3, these really stand out. You're able to walk really far into this place. The rooms all keep up this decrepit vibe, and once or twice I honestly did feel like I saw someone running or something out of the corner of my eye. It's the only place in this game that really enters the realm of being creepy whatsoever. If you keep moving, you'll find all sorts of stuff. Props and things that really give this place character. What's weird is how it simultaneously looks like it's been abandoned and rotting for decades, but how it also looks like people were just working here yesterday. I found some really cool stuff in the details here. For one, you can find some newspapers describing the terrible rebellion and DeRavello's successes. There are books on the desk, and though they're copies of one another to look like a bigger stack, one reads, "Grappling with Earth," which I think might be an Easter egg no one has discovered yet. There's a door here that leads to nothing. A boat you can enter but not drive very far. And finally, an Easter egg of a shark. I found something super fascinating to me in here. Remember that Malta comparison I made earlier? I swear I wrote that in the script before I discovered this, but if you go to the pinboard, you can find maps of both Italy and Malta. I think I was probably onto something. Maybe the Black Hand were going to invade them next. There's another map of a place I don't recognize, and some nods to both the army and rebellion. There are also about 500 NDAs scattered on the floor too. The place is just odd, to be honest, and very much worth a walkthrough if you haven't been here since playing. The last spot I'm going to cover today is just something random I found. The churches in the game are very much cookie cutter, like most of the architecture, but they still have some individual character to them. I, for one, like Sancta Ana because it's built right next to these ruins and just has this nice cliff view. Something I never noticed until recording this was actually that if you enter the church courtyard, you'll hear singing, which is kind of pretty. The thing that really confused me about this spot, and I've since gone on to find a few of these actually, are these church garages. They're built in the same architectural style, with the same roofs, but why are they here? Why are there so many? I mean, I know like the Pope Mobile exists, but what would the cathedral use this for? Anyway, might be a lame way to end the video, but I just wanted to throw that one in. This video was a really fun one to make. I put this together really quickly, but I'm just glad this trend came around because it gave me the opportunity to sort of throw a kitchen sink of ideas at you, but keep it strung together with a sort of theme. I know this is considered by many to be a dead game, but it was on my mind recently, like I said, and if this video does well, I will make some more Just Cause 3 content to celebrate its anniversary. I'd like to make a video expanding on the propaganda theory I made in my iceberg. If you want to know what that is, go check out my final entry on that video. But I also might talk about the messages of the rebellion and the language, or just dive a little deeper into the game's lore. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this little video. I'm almost done with school, so there is more content on the way. Make sure to subscribe so you're staying tuned for that. Also, if you want to say thanks, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribe to my second channel. You guys can actually still get on that while it's under 100 subscribers. I put random travel content and stuff on there, but even if you never watch the videos, the subs really help me out as I'm trying to get to 1,000 as soon as I can. Thank you again to all my awesome Patreon members who watched this video early. Consider subscribing if you want to be a part of that exclusive group and get early uploads and thank yous in every video. Once again, thank you all, and I'll see you guys soon.